She stood in front of the small mirror in her rented room, holding an invitation that still did not feel real. The paper was thick and smooth, the kind she had only seen in movies or in the hands of rich people at her workplace. It carried the address of a luxury house, the date, and the name of an event she never imagined she would attend. A private party. Elegant. Exclusive. The kind of place where people wore confidence as easily as they wore expensive clothes. She read the invitation again, slowly, as if the words might change if she looked away for too long. The invitation had come through a coworker, someone she barely spoke to, someone who only remembered her because she was always helpful. That coworker had said it casually, almost as an afterthought, "You can come too if you want. They need extra guests."
Extra guest.
The words stayed with her. She knew what they meant. She was not really wanted. She was just filling space. Her room was quiet, except for the sound of traffic outside and the ticking of a cheap wall clock. The walls were plain. The furniture was old. Everything in her life had been earned through effort, patience, and long hours. She worked hard every day, often doing more than she was asked. Not because she expected praise, but because that was how she survived. Hard work was her shield in a world that rarely offered kindness for free. She placed the invitation on the bed and sat down slowly. A part of her wanted to tear it apart and throw it away. She already knew how these places worked. People looked first, judged second, and only listened if they thought you mattered. She had learned that lesson early in life. Growing up with very little teaches a person when to stay quiet and when to disappear. She thought about the dress hanging behind the door. It was the best one she owned, but she also knew it was not meant for a place like that. It was simple, clean, and faded slightly at the edges. She had worn it before 2 interviews and important meetings. It had never failed her, but this was different. This was not about being neat or respectful. This was about fitting into a world that did not welcome people like her. She picked up her phone and scrolled through messages, hoping for an excuse not to go. Maybe the party would be canceled. Maybe someone would tell her not to come after all. But nothing changed. The invitation remained real, heavy in her hands. Her mind traveled back to the past, to moments when she had been in rooms where she did not belong. She remembered standing silently while others laughed at jokes she did not understand. She remembered pretending not to hear comments about her clothes, her accent, her background. Each time, she had told herself it did not matter. She had survived worse. She always did. Still, something about this invitation felt different. It was not hope exactly. It was more like a quiet challenge. A question she had never asked herself before. What if she went anyway? What if she walked into that room and stayed, no matter how uncomfortable it felt? Not to impress anyone, not to be noticed, just to prove to herself that fear would not always decide her choices. She stood up again and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was tired, but her eyes were honest. There was strength there, built slowly over years of disappointment and effort. She brushed her hair with care, the way her mother had once taught her, back when life had been simpler. Even if it had been harder, her mother's voice echoed faintly in her memory. Walk with dignity. Even when you have nothing, dignity is something no one can take from you. Those words had stayed with her through every struggle, through every long night, through every moment she felt invisible. She checked the address again and searched it online. The pictures showed a large house, bright lights, clean gardens, and expensive cars parked in long lines. She imagined herself standing there, small among people who had never worried about rent or empty cupboards. The thought made her stomach tighten. She almost sent a message saying she could not come. Her fingers hovered over the screen. It would be easy. No one would question it. No one would miss her. But then she thought about all the times she had stepped back, all the doors she had closed before even knocking. Slowly she lowered the phone. If nothing else, she would go, see the place, and leave early. That was her plan. Arrive quietly. Stay near the edges. Smiled politely. Leave before anyone noticed her absence. As the day of the party arrived, she prepared carefully. She washed her dress, ironed it until every line was smooth, and polished her shoes until they looked almost new. Each small action was done with focus, as if preparation itself gave her courage. She packed a simple purse with only what she needed. No makeup beyond what she usually wore. No jewelry except a small piece she had owned for years. When she stepped outside, the evening air felt cooler than usual. The sky was clear, and the city lights were starting to glow. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that this was just another place, just another room filled with people. People were people, no matter how much money they had. The journey to the party felt longer than it really was. Every turn brought new doubt. She watched the city change through the window, buildings growing larger, streets becoming cleaner, shops more expensive. By the time she arrived, her hands were cold. The house stood tall and bright, exactly like the pictures. Music floated through the air. Laughter echoed from inside. She paused at the entrance, adjusting her dress one last time. For a moment, she considered turning back. No one had seen her yet. She could still leave, but she didn't. She stepped forward, handed the invitation at the door, and entered the party. The warmth inside was immediate. Lights reflected off glass and polished floors. People stood in groups, holding drinks, smiling easily. Conversations flowed without effort. She moved slowly, careful not to draw attention. She stayed near the walls, observing. Everyone seemed confident, relaxed, sure of their place. She felt like a guest in someone else's dream. A few eyes turned toward her. Some glanced away quickly. Others lingered a second too long. She recognized those looks. Curiosity mixed with judgment. She kept her head high, just as her mother had taught her, and walked forward. Inside her chest, her heart beat fast, but her face remained calm. She reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong. She had an invitation. She belonged here as much as anyone else, even if no one else believed it. She found a quiet corner near a table and stood there, hands folded, waiting. Waiting for time to pass. Waiting for the courage she hoped would come. She did not know yet that this decision, this single step into a room she feared, was the beginning of something that would change her life forever. For now, she was just a woman standing alone at a party, unseen by most, misunderstood by many, and judged by some. She did not know what was about to happen next. She only knew that she had shown up, and for her, that alone already mattered. The room was filled with music, soft but lively, creating a rhythm that seemed to make everyone around her move with ease. She watched from her corner as groups of people laughed and clinked glasses. The air smelled of perfume, food, and a faint hint of expensive cologne. She took a slow breath, reminding herself that she was not here to impress anyone. She was here simply because she had chosen to show up. A group of young women approached her, their smiles polite but their eyes curious. One of them leaned in slightly, whispering something that she could not catch. The others giggled quietly. She felt the weight of their stares, sensing that they were judging her dress, her shoes, the way she carried herself. She smiled politely, nodded, and moved a little away, hoping to escape their scrutiny. A man standing nearby noticed her discomfort. He was tall, with sharp features, and a suit that looked tailored to perfection. He did not approach immediately, but observed her for a moment, as if studying her presence. She did not know his intentions, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he saw more than the surface. He saw her hesitation, her unease, and yet he did not judge her for it. She tried to focus on something else. The food table caught her eye, filled with delicacies she could not afford in her everyday life. Small sandwiches, colorful desserts, sparkling drinks, everything looked perfect, almost unreal. She took a small plate and chose a few pieces carefully, making sure to appear natural. Every action felt like a performance, even though she did not want it to be. As she stood there, she noticed the conversations around her. People spoke of vacations, investments, parties, and events she had never heard of. She felt out of place, but she told herself it was temporary. She would observe, learn, and leave quietly when the time came. Then it happened. A careless comment, a laugh that cut through the noise. One of the women from earlier whispered loudly enough for others to hear, "Look at her shoes." Did she really think she could come here like that? Laughter followed, a sharp, cruel sound that made her cheeks burn. She felt every eye on her, and for the first time that night, she wished she could disappear. Her hands trembled slightly, and she gripped her plate tighter. She wanted to run, to escape the humiliation, but something inside her stopped her. She had faced hard times before. She had been poor, underestimated, and dismissed countless times. She had survived each moment, and she would survive this one too. Before she could retreat, the man in the suit approached. He spoke quietly but firmly. "Would you like a glass of something?" He gestured to the drinks. She nodded, surprised by his attention. He did not ask questions. He did not judge. He simply offered a gesture of kindness that she had not expected, as he poured a glass of sparkling water. He spoke casually, trying to make her feel comfortable. "I'm not sure everyone here understands what courage looks like," he said, his voice calm. She looked at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. Courage? Was it courage to simply stand here and be laughed at? "It takes courage to be yourself in a room full of people who expect you to be someone else," he continued. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a small but powerful reassurance that she was not entirely invisible. For the first time that night, someone had seen her without judgment. She thanked him quietly and took a small sip from her glass. The sparkle of the drink reflected the lights in the room. For a brief moment, she felt a strange mixture of relief and curiosity. Who was this man? Why had he chosen to speak to her when so many others ignored or mocked her? The women who had whispered earlier noticed the interaction and frowned. One of them muttered under her breath, clearly unhappy that the attention had shifted. She felt a sense of triumph rising in her chest, not for herself, but for the simple act of being acknowledged with respect. A few minutes later, the man returned with another drink, gesturing to a quieter part of the room. "Would you like to sit somewhere? It's easier to talk without all the noise." She hesitated, then nodded. As they moved to a small lounge area, she realized that the room felt less intimidating from this distance. The laughter and whispers were still there, but they seemed less important. They sat on a comfortable sofa, the lights dimmer here, and the music softer. He introduced himself briefly, but she noticed that he did not focus on his name or status. He focused on her, asking simple questions about her life, her work, her experiences. He listened carefully, nodding, occasionally asking for clarification. She had not expected such genuine interest, and it took her a moment to respond. She started to speak about her job, the challenges she faced every day, and the small victories she cherished. She spoke quietly at first, unsure if her words were interesting enough. But as he listened, encouraging her with nods and thoughtful comments, she found herself speaking more freely. She felt a sense of connection she had never anticipated as the conversation continued. She noticed other guests glancing their way. Whispers followed them, curious and speculative, but she no longer cared. The laughter from earlier seemed distant. For the first time that night, she felt a sense of control. She was not invisible anymore, nor was she mocked. She was acknowledged. Then, a moment came when a server accidentally spilled a drink nearby. The liquid spread across the floor, and some guests laughed nervously. She instinctively reached for napkins to help clean up, not thinking about how others might perceive her. She simply acted. The man beside her smiled, appreciating her quick response. "Thank you," he said. Not everyone would have noticed. Her small act of kindness drew more attention than she expected. A few guests offered thanks, some nodded politely, and a few even smiled genuinely. She realized that her actions, simple as they were, mattered. She was no longer just an outsider. She had made a small mark on the evening. As the night progressed, more conversations unfolded. She learned about people's interests, their passions, and their worries. It surprised her how similar they were to her own struggles in life, just framed differently. The differences in wealth, appearance, status mattered less when the human side of people came through. She laughed for the first time that night, sound that felt natural and unforced. The laughter was shared with someone who genuinely appreciated it, and it echoed back a sense of relief and joy. She realized that even in a room designed to highlight differences, connection could still exist. Hours passed quickly, and she no longer felt like a guest merely filling space. She had her own presence, her own voice, her own value, and yet she knew the evening was far from over. The man's subtle influence and respect had given her a glimpse of something powerful, something that could change the way she saw herself as the party continued around them. She began to notice small acts of kindness she had missed earlier. People helping each other, offering drinks, sharing jokes without cruelty. She realized that even in a world that often seemed harsh and exclusive, moments of genuine human connection could still happen. And then, without warning, the room shifted in focus. A conversation at the other side of the room grew louder. She glanced up to see a situation unfolding that would challenge everything she had just learned. People were pointing, whispering, and laughing once more. Her heart sank, knowing she might be the target again, but she did not panic. She remembered the man who had spoken to her kindly, the small acts of acknowledgement that had made her feel seen. She stood taller, squared her shoulders, decided to face whatever came next with the courage she had discovered within herself. She was not invisible. She was not weak. And no matter what happened in the next moments, she was determined to remain true to herself. The laughter and whispers from the other side of the room grew louder. She could feel the familiar sting of humiliation creeping in, but this time, it did not freeze her. Instead, it awakened something inside her resolve she had never known she possessed. The night had already tested her courage, and she realized she had passed the first challenge.
Simply by showing up and being herself?
The source of the commotion was a group of people gathered near the main hall. They were pointing, whispering, and laughing at someone or something that had caught their attention. Her heart tightened, and instinctively, she took a small step closer, trying to see what had caused the reaction. Her eyes landed on herself. One of the women who had mocked her earlier had pointed in her direction again. Smiling cruelly and speaking in a tone meant to shame, a wave of panic surged through her. But she reminded herself to breathe. The man who had befriended her earlier noticed immediately. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ignore them," he said softly. "They are loud, but they don't define you." His words were a shield against the growing fear and humiliation. She felt a strange sense of relief. She was not alone. The group of people who had laughed at her began to move closer, their whispers sharp and pointed. Some of them made comments about her clothes, her shoes, even her hair. The laughter that followed was cruel and deliberate. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, to vanish completely. But she did not. She straightened her back, squared her shoulders, and held her head high. For the first time that night, she realized that her dignity was hers to keep. No matter what others said. The man beside her noticed the tension and stepped forward. His presence commanded attention without shouting. He spoke in a calm, firm voice that carried across the room. "Enough," he said simply. The room went quiet for a moment. Everyone turned toward him, surprised by the interruption. The group that had mocked her looked annoyed, as if their control over the situation had been challenged. "You have made your point," he continued. "Let's remember that respect is not optional. It is required." His words carried weight. People who had been whispering and laughing found themselves caught off guard. She watched as their expressions shifted from smugness to unease. For the first time, she felt a sense of safety, a small but powerful shield of support that changed everything. He smiled at her. A simple gesture that conveyed confidence and reassurance. She felt warmth spread through her chest. The fear and anxiety that had gripped her moments ago began to fade. She realized that she had allies, even in a place that had seemed so hostile. She was not invisible and she was not powerless. The woman who had mocked her first moved away, her expression a mixture of anger and embarrassment. The others in the group seemed unsure of how to react. Some looked away, while others tried to maintain their composure, but the air had shifted. The laughter and whispers were no longer weapons against her. They were silenced by the presence of someone who saw her worth. She took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her body begin to ease. The man gestured toward a quieter area of the room, and she followed, as grateful for the opportunity to step away from the lingering hostility. As they moved, she noticed the party in a new light. The decorations, the food, the music hit was all still beautiful, but it no longer intimidated her. She felt more in control, more present, and more confident. They found a small seating area near a window that overlooked a garden, lit with soft lights. She could see the reflection of the party in the glass, a lively scene that had almost overwhelmed her earlier. Sitting down, she felt a sense of calm that had been missing for much of the evening. The man offered her a drink, and she accepted, taking a careful sip as she let her thoughts settle. He spoke about small things at first, books, travel, music, but the conversation gradually turned deeper. He asked about her experiences, her challenges, and her dreams. She was surprised by how easily the words flowed. She spoke openly, sharing parts of her life she had rarely voiced aloud. She talked about her struggles, the hard work that kept her afloat, and the moments of doubt that had once seemed insurmountable. He listened without interruption, nodding and responding thoughtfully. She felt seen in a way that was both rare and comforting. The party around them continued, but it no longer mattered as much. She had found a space where her voice could exist without judgment, where her story could be heard and valued. Time seemed to pass differently in this corner. Conversations with others became secondary as she and the man continued to share insights, experiences, and reflections. She laughed more freely now, the sound unforced and genuine. She realized that laughter could be an act of courage, a way to reclaim space that others had tried to take from her. The night was not without its challenges. Occasionally, she noticed glances from people who still whispered or smirked, but she had learned how to navigate them. She had allies, she had confidence, and she had discovered a strength that came from within. The small victories, the moments of recognition, and the simple act of being present all contributed to a growing sense of empowerment. At one point, a misunderstanding occurred near the main hall. A guest had dropped a drink, and a few people began pointing fingers and assigning blame. She instinctively moved forward to help, offering napkins and a kind word to those involved. The man beside her smiled again, acknowledging her quick response. The action drew attention, but this time it was respectful attention. People noticed her kindness, her willingness to act, and the calm she brought to the situation. As the evening progressed, she continued to navigate the social dynamics of the party. She found herself engaging in small, meaningful conversations, connecting with others in ways she had not anticipated. She realized that her presence mattered, that her voice could be heard, and that her actions could influence the atmosphere around her. The man who had supported her continued to guide and encourage her, subtly introducing her to others and creating opportunities for her to participate without fear. Each interaction strengthened her confidence, reinforcing the idea that she belonged in this space not because of wealth or status, but because of her character, intelligence, and courage. The evening began to wind down, and she reflected on the journey she had taken in just a few hours. From a corner filled with anxiety and fear to a position of presence and influence, she had experienced a transformation. The humiliation and mockery that had threatened to overwhelm her had been met with courage, kindness, and a recognition of her own worth. As the party drew to a close, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She had faced her fears, navigated social hostility, discovered the power of presence, dignity, and human connection. She had been mocked and shamed, but she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more aware of her value. The man beside her offered a final word of encouragement. "Remember this night," he said. "Not because of the party, but because of what you learned about yourself. You are stronger than you realize." She nodded, feeling the truth of his words resonate deeply. Walking toward the exit, she noticed the reactions of others once more. This time, she did not flinch. She held her head high, knowing that she had earned her place in the room. It's not through wealth or status, but through courage, integrity, and resilience. The laughter and whispers still existed, but they no longer had the power to define her. She stepped out into the cool night air, the sounds of the party fading behind her. The city felt alive and expansive, full of possibilities she had never imagined. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of freedom, a sense that she could face whatever challenges awaited her. confidence and strength, and she knew that the night was only the beginning. The lessons she had learned, the courage she had discovered, and the recognition she had received would stay with her. They would guide her through future challenges, remind her of her worth, and inspire her to continue moving forward, no matter what obstacles appeared in her path. After the party, she found herself walking slowly along the quiet streets, the cool night air brushing against her skin. Her mind replayed every moment of the evening, the laughter, the whispers, the gestures of kindness that had seemed small but carried immense weight. She realized how much had changed in just a few hours, how a single night could challenge her perception of herself and the world around her. She remembered the mockery, the sharp, cutting words aimed to belittle her. They had stung at first, but she now understood that those moments had been temporary, fleeting, and ultimately powerless against the courage she had discovered within herself. For the first time, she recognized that the opinions of others did not define her. She had survived ridicule before, and this night had taught her how to transform fear into strength. As she walked, she thought about the man who had offered her guidance and reassurance. His presence had been unexpected yet transformative. He had not tried to impress her with wealth or status. Instead, he had seen her, truly seen her, and treated her with respect. His words had reminded her of something she had always known deep down, but had rarely acknowledged: that her dignity and worth were not dependent on the judgment of others. The city lights reflected off the pavement, creating a shimmer that made her feel almost unreal. She considered the simplicity of her life, the struggles she faced daily, and how far she had come despite those obstacles. She had worked hard to survive, to maintain her integrity, and to find moments of joy even when circumstances were harsh. Tonight had shown her that her resilience was not invisible. It could be noticed, valued, and respected. Her thoughts drifted to the future. What if she applied the courage she had discovered tonight to her everyday life? What if she refused to let fear or judgment hold her back? The possibilities seemed endless, exciting, and a little frightening. Change was never easy, but she now understood that stepping into discomfort could lead to growth, confidence, and unexpected connections. She arrived at her small apartment building and paused at the door, taking another deep breath. The familiar surroundings felt comforting, grounding her after the whirlwind of the party. She unlocked her door and stepped inside, the quiet of her space wrapping around her like a protective blanket. For a moment, she allowed herself to simply breathe, to absorb the lessons of the night, and to appreciate the courage it had taken to face fear head-on. Sitting down on the edge of her bed, she took out her journal. Writing had always been a way for her to process her thoughts and emotions, and tonight was no exception. She began to write about the events of the evening, the mockery, the whispers, the laughter, and the moments of genuine kindness. She wrote about the courage it had taken to remain present, to speak, to act, and to connect. As she wrote, she reflected on the power of empathy and understanding. The man who had guided her through the evening had shown her that even a single act of kindness could shift the dynamics of an entire room. She realized that she too could wield that power in her own life, that her actions and words could create positive change. No matter how small or seemingly insignificant, her mind wandered to the people at the party who had mocked her. She felt a mixture of pity and understanding. They were constrained by their own insecurities and expectations, unable to recognize the strength and dignity of someone different from themselves. She did not feel anger or resentment. Instead, she felt a sense of liberation. Knowing that their judgment held no real power over her, she thought about the importance of self-respect and boundaries. The party had taught her that standing tall, maintaining dignity, and responding with calm confidence could disarm negativity and command respect. These lessons were not about wealth, status, or appearance. They were about character, courage, and integrity. She understood that true strength came from within and that it could not be taken away by others. The night continued quietly, and she allowed herself to rest while reflecting on the subtle changes in her perception. She realized that her confidence had grown, not from external validation, but from recognizing her own resilience and worth. She felt a sense of empowerment that she had never experienced before, a knowledge that she could face challenges, navigate social dynamics, and maintain her integrity no matter the circumstances. She also reflected on the unexpected friendships and connections that had formed during the evening. Small acts of kindness, genuine interest in her experiences, and thoughtful gestures had created a space where she felt seen and valued. She understood that connection was not dependent on wealth, appearance, or status. It was rooted in empathy, respect, and shared humanity. The lessons from the night extended beyond the party. She began to consider how she could apply them in her daily life, at work, in her social interactions, and even within her own family. She realized that courage, empathy, and integrity were tools she could carry with her, shaping her choices and influencing the world around her in meaningful ways as the hours passed. She felt a sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the experience, for the courage it had taken to attend, and for the personal growth she had achieved. She understood that life would continue to present challenges, judgment, and moments of discomfort. But now, she had a blueprint for navigating those challenges with confidence, dignity, and grace. She placed the journal on her bedside table and prepared for sleep, her mind filled with reflections and possibilities. She knew that tomorrow would bring its own trials and opportunities, but she felt ready to face them with the lessons of the night guiding her. Before closing her eyes, she thought once more about the man who had believed in her. His kindness had been a catalyst, a reminder that even small acts of recognition could create profound change. She resolved to carry that lesson forward, to offer kindness and support to others, and to create spaces where empathy and respect could flourish. Lying in bed, she felt a deep sense of peace. The fear and mockery of earlier had not disappeared, but they had been transformed. They were no longer sources of pain, but reminders of her resilience and growth. She understood that life was a series of challenges and opportunities, and that courage, integrity, and empathy were the tools she could use to navigate them successfully. The night passed quietly. Filled with reflection, growth, and the quiet strength that comes from overcoming fear, she knew that she was not the same person who had entered the party hours earlier. She was stronger, wiser, and more aware of her own worth. And she understood that this night, this experience would stay with her forever, guiding her through the complexities of life with confidence, dignity, and compassion. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, waking her gently from a night filled with reflection and growth. She felt different somehow, lighter and more confident than she had in years. The events of the previous evening played in her mind like a film, the laughter, the whispers, the moments of kindness, and the small victories she had claimed along the way. She rose from bed, her movements deliberate, as if every action carried significance now. Breakfast was simple, as usual, but she ate with a new sense of purpose. She thought about how she could carry the lessons of the party into her everyday life. The courage to stand tall, the dignity to maintain herself in the face of mockery, and the strength to act with kindness. These were not just lessons for one night. They were tools for life. Her phone buzzed on the table. A message from her coworker who had invited her to the party appeared. It read simply, "Glad you came. You handled yourself well." She smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the words themselves and everything to do with the acknowledgement. She typed a quick reply, thanking them and mentioning how much she had learned. The simple act of expressing gratitude felt empowering. The memory of the man who had offered support and kindness at the party lingered in her mind. She realized that genuine human connection could transform fear into courage and isolation into belonging. She resolved to remember this, not just for herself, but for others who might need the same support in the future. As she prepared for her day, she reflected on her work and daily life. Challenges that had once seemed overwhelming now appeared manageable. She understood that her confidence did not come from others' approval, but from the recognition of her own resilience. She had survived mockery, faced fear, and emerged stronger. That knowledge alone was a source of power. The streets were bustling as she stepped outside, but the noise and activity did not overwhelm her. She moved with a quiet assurance, noticing small details she had overlooked before. The smile of a shopkeeper, the laughter of children playing, the gentle rhythm of life around her. She felt connected to the world in a way she had not experienced previously. At work, she noticed the subtle shifts in her perspective. Tasks that had once felt daunting now seemed approachable. Interactions with colleagues carried a new sense of calm and confidence. She spoke up in meetings, offering ideas without hesitation. She realized that the courage she had discovered at the party extended far beyond that single night. It was now a part of her, influencing her choices, her actions, her interactions. Later that day, she took a moment to visit a nearby park, seeking a quiet place to reflect. The sunlight filtered through the trees, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. She found a bench and sat down, watching people pass by. Some were hurried, some were relaxed, and some, like her, seemed lost in thought. She understood that everyone carried their own struggles, their own moments of fear, and their own opportunities for courage. Her mind wandered back to the party, to the moments of mockery and judgment. She realized that these experiences, while painful, had been transformative. They had forced her to confront fear, embrace vulnerability, and discover strength she had not fully acknowledged. She felt gratitude for the challenges, as much as for the kindness she had received. A thought occurred to her. What if she could extend the same support and kindness to others? She remembered how a single act of acknowledgement had changed the dynamic for her. Perhaps she could do the same for someone else, offering encouragement, recognition, and understanding where it was needed most. The idea filled her with a sense of purpose and responsibility. She decided to reach out to a coworker who had recently seemed isolated and overlooked. She sent a brief message, inviting them for coffee during lunch. The reply came quickly, and a small smile tugged at her lips. She understood the impact of even the simplest gestures of kindness and connection. The afternoon passed with a mix of work and reflection. She noticed how her interactions had become more meaningful, more deliberate. She spoke with intention, listened with care, and observed with awareness. She realized that the courage she had discovered was not about grand gestures, but about the small, consistent choices she made each day. As evening approached, she found herself thinking about the man from the party once more. She had no way to contact him, but she carried the lessons he had imparted in her heart. His example had shown her the power of empathy, respect, and attention. She resolved to embody those qualities in her own life, to create spaces where others could feel seen, valued, and supported. Dinner was quiet, and she allowed herself to savor the stillness. She reflected on the night, the morning, and the day, recognizing the profound shift that had occurred. She had faced mockery, judgment, and fear, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, more aware of her own worth. She understood that these experiences were not isolated, but part of a larger journey towards self-discovery and empowerment. Later, she took out her journal once more. She wrote about the party, the challenges she had faced, the kindness she had received, and the lessons she had learned. She wrote about the courage to stand tall, the dignity to maintain herself, and the strength to act with empathy. Each word reinforced her understanding and commitment to living with integrity, compassion, and confidence. As the night deepened, she reflected on her journey. She had arrived at the party feeling anxious and uncertain, only to face mockery and judgment. Yet through courage, resilience, and the support of a single compassionate person, she had discovered a new dimension of herself. She had learned that fear could be transformed into strength, that mockery could be met with dignity, and that connection could be found even in unexpected places. She understood that life was a series of challenges and opportunities, each moment offering a choice, to shrink in fear or to stand tall with courage. She chose courage. She chose dignity. She chose to act with kindness and empathy. She chose to recognize her own worth and to honor the worth of others. Lying in bed that night, she felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment. The lessons of the evening, the morning, and the day had become a part of her, guiding her toward a future filled with possibility and purpose. She knew that challenges would continue to arise, that fear and judgment would still be present. But she also knew that she now had the tools to navigate them with confidence, integrity, and grace. And so, as she closed her eyes and allowed herself to rest, She carried with her the knowledge that she had faced mockery, shame, and fear, and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. She had discovered the power of courage, dignity, and empathy, and she understood that these qualities would guide her through life, shaping her choices, her actions, and her relationships for years to come. She drifted into sleep with a sense of empowerment and hope, knowing that this night, this experience, and the lessons learned would remain with her forever. She had been mocked and shamed, but she had risen above it, finding strength, connection, and a deeper understanding of her own value. And that, she knew, was a victory far greater than any judgment or insult could ever diminish. The next day felt brighter than usual, as if the city itself had noticed the change in her. She walked through the streets with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. Each step, a quiet declaration of her newfound confidence. The events of the party still lingered in her mind, not as a source of fear, but as a story of courage, resilience, and unexpected connection. Her morning routine felt different. She prepared her breakfast slowly, appreciating the simplicity and comfort of her home. As she sipped her tea, she reflected on how much had shifted in just a few days. The mockery, the whispers, the judgment that had once felt overwhelming now seemed like small obstacles she had learned to navigate. The kindness and support she had experienced were treasures she intended to carry forward. At work, she noticed subtle changes in how she approached her responsibilities. Tasks that had once seemed intimidating now felt like opportunities to demonstrate her capability and determination. She spoke with clarity and confidence, contributing ideas without hesitation. Colleagues who had previously overlooked her began to notice the shift in her demeanor. Sensing a quiet strength that demanded respect, she recalled the lessons from the party. That courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That dignity could be maintained even in the face of ridicule. And that empathy and kindness could create spaces of connection in places she had once thought hostile. She began to apply these lessons consciously, not only in her work, but in small interactions throughout her day. During lunch, she visited the park again, seeking a quiet moment to reflect. The sunlight played through the leaves, casting patterns on the ground that felt almost like a gentle reminder of her journey. She watched people pass by, each carrying their own burdens, each navigating their own challenges. She realized that courage and empathy were universal tools. It's available to anyone willing to use them. Her thoughts drifted to the man from the party. She had no way to contact him, but his example remained with her. His simple act of acknowledgement and respect had transformed her experience, reminding her that even small gestures could have profound effects. She considered how she could embody that same approach, offering encouragement and support to those around her, quietly but powerfully influencing the world. As the afternoon progressed, she found herself engaged in conversations with coworkers in a way she hadn't before. She listened attentively, spoke thoughtfully, and responded with kindness and confidence. She realized that her presence now carried weight, not because of status or authority, but because of the authenticity and integrity she brought into every interaction. Later, she took a moment to reflect on her personal life. There were relationships that had grown distant, opportunities she had missed, and dreams she had set aside. She understood that her growth was not limited to the events of a single party, but extended to all aspects of her life. She felt a renewed determination to pursue her goals, nurture meaningful relationships, and continue cultivating her own sense of worth. In the evening, she visited a small community center to volunteer. Helping others had always been important to her, but now it felt more purposeful. She interacted with children and adults alike, offering support, encouragement, and a listening ear. Each act, no matter how small, reinforced her understanding of the power of kindness and the importance of contributing positively to the lives of others. As night fell, she returned home, tired but fulfilled. She reflected on the series of experiences that had shaped her journey, the fear she had faced, the mockery she had endured, and the courage she had discovered. She realized that life would continue to present challenges, but she now possessed the tools to navigate them with dignity, confidence, and compassion. She sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The memory of the party and the man's guidance remained vivid, a source of inspiration and reassurance. She understood that personal growth was a continuous process, one that required courage, self-reflection, and the willingness to step into discomfort when necessary. Her journal lay open on the table, filled with reflections and insights. She began to write again, capturing the essence of her experiences. The lessons she had learned and the aspirations she held for the future. Writing became a way to solidify her understanding, to honor her journey, and to create a record of her growth. As she wrote, she thought about the impact of small actions. A smile, a word of encouragement, a gesture of support. These were not grand achievements, but they carried the power to change lives. She understood that her own courage and kindness could ripple outward, affecting those around her in ways she might never fully see. The night grew quiet, and she allowed herself to rest in the comfort of her reflections. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had faced fear, embraced her dignity, and acted with integrity. She understood that life's challenges were inevitable, but she was now equipped to navigate them with strength and grace. Before going to sleep, she thought about the journey ahead. There would be moments of doubt, moments of judgment, and moments that tested her resolve. But she also knew that each challenge was an opportunity to practice courage, to demonstrate empathy, and to reinforce her own sense of worth. She was ready to face the future with confidence, knowing that she had discovered a well of strength within herself that could never be taken away. Lying in bed, she felt a profound sense of peace. The lessons of the party, the guidance she had received, the growth she had experienced were now integral parts of her identity. She understood that true power lay not in wealth or status, but in courage, dignity, and the ability to act with kindness. She drifted into sleep with a sense of fulfillment, knowing that the experiences she had lived through would continue to guide her. She had been mocked and shamed, but she had risen above it. She had discovered resilience, empathy, and the quiet strength that comes from believing in oneself. And she knew that with these qualities, she could face whatever challenges awaited her, transform fear into opportunity, and continue to grow into the person she was meant to be.